believe we saw folks trickling in. And I know that we all just came back from networking or lunch. So maybe let's start off with like just a quick stretch and just get those lunch jitters out and networking jitters out. But I'm so excited to welcome you all to one of the most inspiring sessions today, the first gen Trailblazers in Tech. My name is Katie Fung, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm reporting in live from Houston, Texas, as a first gen in tech. Somebody similar to you, and also a tech recruiter here at HubSpot. It's my honor to be your host for this discussion, where we will celebrate and dive deep into journeys of the remarkable folks you see on screen before you. Our panel today consists of 3 HubSpotters who are not only impressive but also trailblazers as first gens in tech themselves, similar to all of us here today. And we'll have the privilege of hearing their story. And also, we want you all to feel super encouraged and empowered to engage in the chat. Definitely in the Q&A, we want you to drop those questions that you have. We have a fantastic chat ghost moderator working with us today as well. And they'll also be keeping an eye out on those Q&A questions. So let's use this time now to kind of help each other out, support each other, and build a really great community here. Now, I'm going to pass it off to these panelists first for their introductions. Let's start off in reverse alphabetical order. Let's switch it up a little bit and turn this virtual mic over to Nadine.
Sweet. Sounds like there's some background noise, but I'm Nadine. My last name is Nieves. I work here at HubSpot. I am a growth specialist here, or account executive. There's a million names for a salesperson here at HubSpot. I've been here for about 2 years now, but I've been in tech for just about four and a half years almost. So super excited to be here. I will pass it over to Cami.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Camila Rodriguez. I'm an account executive or growth specialist here at HubSpot. I've been here for close to a year now, but not unfamiliar with the tech space. I've actually been in MarTech for coming up on 7 years now. Super excited to be part of this panel and share my story and hopefully help others. Brenda?
Thanks, Cami. My name is Brenda. I'm also at HubSpot. I am a marketing technology manager or a marketing operations manager here, and I help a bunch of our marketing departments, different team members really get the data that they need. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I identify as a trailblazer myself. I'm an immigrant. My family's, we are all immigrants from Bolivia, and I'm the first in my family to have gone to college and to enter the tech space. So I'm excited to be here and share some of my stories.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for the introductions and for being here today. Really enjoying the space that we've had so far in this broader event, and also really appreciate y'all's vulnerability and truth as we dive into what it means to be first gen in tech and as a trailblazer, right? So folks, don't forget that in the session, underneath the little tab on the right hand side next to chat, polls, and people, there's a Q&A section. Feel free to drop in those questions. Hema, our chat moderator, is going to be helping us to identify which questions will get highlighted later. But we're going to start off with some pre-planned questions for sure. So the very first one I have, it's going to be a hard hitter, I think. So we're going to start off with, what are some of those significant challenges you faced as a first-gen professional in tech? And the second part, how did you overcome it? So let's turn it over to maybe with Brenda, since we started reverse order.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. Something that comes up for me a lot is that it happened a lot more at the beginning of my career, and I didn't know how to do it, but there is this moment that I have where it's like, I need to find an answer to something, or I need to figure out how to do something, and I don't know. I've never done this task. I've never written this report. And I'm like, okay, how can I look at all the resources on Slack or on internal pages and figure out what the best template is, what I need to do, all of these things I kind of start spiraling on whenever something's net new. And it was really challenging at the beginning of my career, but I started at HubSpot in technical support. And what was really great about technical support is that you are supposed to know everything and anything about the product. So there was a good layout at the beginning of the first 5 places to look for an answer. And then if you didn't have the answer, you had a long list of people that you can go ask. That, and also you had your team who was constantly getting these questions. So somebody might have gotten the question at some point. So it was I would turn around and be like, does anybody know how to connect email to their integration? and somebody always knew, and they got me used to asking for help there. But when I transitioned into marketing, you didn't have that layout of places to go check first. And it was a lot more challenging then for me to be like, okay, I've done what I think I can on my own. I now have to ask for help. And then just getting over it, like just do it, ask for help. Hey, I've never written this report. Has anybody else, or can somebody look at a draft after I've finished like just brain dumping? And I've never gotten a no. I've never like not gotten direction on that. It's actually really well received. And the more public and transparent you are about it, the more other people can learn, and not have to ask that same question or be able to take from that. That is definitely a challenge that I don't think is ever going to go away. You just have to remind yourself, like, just ask. After you can't look anymore, just ask yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I think so many times I've been like, oh, is this a stupid question? And then I ask and everyone's like, yeah, I had that exact same question. And it's so helpful. And it's also validating too, because you get that response from everyone else. You're like, okay, we're all in the same boat. We're all confused and we could all use some help. And I think even those that are like mentors to us, they realize, yeah, I used to be in that boat. Happy to answer that question. So love that, Brenda. Thank you so much. Let me tag in Nadine now. Maybe if you had a little bit of a different challenge, if you feel free to share. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take a different approach to this answer. I think, and this doesn't just apply to tech, but just in many spaces, if you don't tell people what your value is, they will tell you what your value is. So it's really important to just like identify for yourself, like who you are. I'll give just a few examples. I'll take you back to like high school, for example. I moved from the Bronx, which was just a really bad area that I lived in. And then I went to a school that was just a lot more produced. But anyway, this area here, they tried to put me into English as a second language. I spoke English, just like ghetto English, but they tried to put me in English as a second language. And it was just like fighting for myself and also having people fight for me. That I didn't need to be in English as a second language. This also applied to other spaces of going into tech, telling me that I should be starting in a certain space, maybe as like a BDR, when I had experience already. So just being able to speak for yourself, a lot of that did come from having like mentors. So I highly recommend having mentors. Dr. B spoke about it in one of the other sessions, but a mentor just like helping me understand exactly who I am. Although I knew who I was, I didn't know how to articulate it, especially because of the insecurities I had from not being in tech or having family in tech. So I think it's really important just to just sit for a moment, understand who you are so that you could speak to that and so that you can tell people who you are and what you deserve. So
absolutely. And, that reminds me of some great advice from the previous session with Megan. She talked about, keeping a journal or keeping a Google sheet and just putting in those achievements and accomplishments so that when it comes time for those performance reviews or you're scrambling to figure out what you did for the past month, you have it handy so you can give yourself and assign yourself that value that you bring. But maybe at times it's hard to come up with last minute, right? All right, so Kami, this is for you now. Last one on board, but I believe will be the best answer.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of Brenda and Nadine, I think that one of the challenges that I dealt with and still am working through is imposter syndrome. I often felt like I really had to work twice as hard to prove myself, especially because right when I started back in 2017, there weren't a lot of folks in leadership and even like in my sales team or organization that looked like me, came from, had a Hispanic or Latino background, came from Miami especially. So I think that was one of the hardest things that I've had to overcome, and some of the things that I am working towards right now. And I think that kind of saying what you said, Katie, as far as like really advocating for myself, right? Because of that imposter syndrome creeping in every now and then, it was really difficult for me to like advocate for promotions or advocate for, more fair pay structure. Anything that really helps me level up in my career was one of the things that kind of I've been working through and trying to just improve on every day. And I think how I've overcome this is really kind of networking with peers of similar challenges, or folks that are also Latino or, of different diverse groups that might help see the value or help me see the value and potential of my unique experiences and what I bring to the table.
Absolutely, yeah. And definitely, I think imposter syndrome is something that everyone from all levels has touched on. Even I think Helen, our CPO, who was in that welcome session, has talked about it as well. And yeah, definitely relatable and doesn't discount it, but definitely something we all go through. And it's important to really recognize that. And so let's go ahead and turn over to another question as well. As a trailblazer in tech, what are some of those key skills and mindsets that you really believe are essential for someone to succeed?
Should I go?
Okay, sorry. What key skills or mindsets do you believe are essential for someone aspiring to be a trailblazer in tech? So let me actually maybe turn it over to Nadine for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of those skills, and I think it's interesting because we have so many skills that we don't even realize. Initially, I had all this personal experience of just like having lived through some difficult situations and like living in this survival mode. I think we don't realize that like these are transferable skills that we can use, like the grind, the struggles, the like this drive that we have, we can use that and translate it into skills that are in this tech world. So for example, just being able to be consistent, having that consistency, I think is super important. Also just having like a vision of understanding like where you want to be so that you can get to those places. I think is just really important. So being able to just like think outside of this present moment, like where do you see yourself, is super important. But yeah, I think the drive is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And turning it over now, I think maybe to Brendan, to add on to that.
Yeah, thanks. Along the similar lines as Nadine, I think a skill set that has really helped me, and it's been a muscle that I've had to keep learning, it's really just like being transparent. The more transparent that you can be, I've noticed a lot of people like reciprocate it and actually respond really well to it. And what I mean by that is really just like when you're sitting there thinking that you're putting in all of this work and you're just heads down doing all the stuff you're supposed to be doing, make sure somebody knows that you're doing that. Make sure you're like advocating for yourself, having people see like, oh, like when you say you're busy, they know like you are busy, and they also more importantly know what you're busy with. I think it's really helped me create like a really great environment within my team so that it's respected when I'm busy, but also just like people need to see the work you're doing, whether you're like actively in the role or searching for a role, like posting on LinkedIn, having those resources and really being loud about what you're doing. Don't think that you're bragging. Like nobody else is going to see it unless you're advocating for yourself and showing the work that you're doing. So I would say just like really be open with what you can, really have a good conversation with yourself about what you're willing to share, and then go for it. Just be able to be transparent. I think people will react really well to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ties well to the whole, shine that spotlight on yourself, shout out your achievements, the value you're bringing, because you definitely want folks to be aware, and you can do that by being your own advocate first and foremost, right? All right, so turning it over to Kami now.
Yeah, of course. I would say resiliency is really key, especially in a role like sales where there's so many challenges and there's so many ups and downs and, setbacks, and not every single month is an incredible month as far as performance go. But I think that having resiliency and how you show up every single day despite the outcome is something that is like key, or has been key for me. I will have my moments where I'm like, what am I doing? The imposter syndrome, creeps in. But I think that above imposter syndrome, I have that resiliency to continue to show up for myself, for folks that look like me, to prove like, hey, we're capable of doing this despite the setbacks and challenges. And then to really finish that off, it's like the empathy, right? Like, how do you lead with empathy to, one, have empathy for yourself, that not every single day is going to be an amazing day, but it doesn't take away from what you're working towards and the goals you're hoping to reach. And then using that empathy to help others who might be, in one or two positions behind you as far as not necessarily being in your role, and leading with empathy with them and helping them, achieve that. So I think those are two key things that really matter when you're in this position.
Absolutely. And definitely relevant to as well our heart, right? Because heart at HubSpot, that E stands for empathy. And that's one reason that I was like, oh, I want to join HubSpot, because that's something that's so key, right? When we bring empathy to the workplace, we can really relate to each other. Even as first gens in tech, we can kind of see from all different stories we come in and approach, but I can kind of relate. I know what that means to be, first gen and kind of have that almost barrier, right? So definitely loving that, leading with empathy as well. And then, so definitely want to know about, y'all's accomplishments a little bit. Let's shine the spotlight on y'all too. Shout out that value, right? So how have y'all worked to bring a community for, other first gen professionals in tech? And we turn it over to maybe to Brenda. Yeah.
Yeah, also a great question. I think for me like first and foremost is kind of finding your community and your workplace and all the places that you really like are in. I love finding a community, and for me that's looked like finding folks that look like me, have similar backgrounds as me. I'm also part of the queer community, so that's a big community that I hold near and dear to my heart. And it's been a lot of like just trying to find those folks. They are there, I promise you. Even if you're working remotely for the first time or tuning in, there are folks that look like you in those spaces, and it's just a matter of finding them, whether it's by sharing something that's like important to one of your identities and just being like who responds to it. I also, during the interview processes for different roles, I've asked if there's one question that I've asked is like, what's a employee resource group activity or event that you have attended or like facilitated? And I asked the interviewer that, one, to gauge what their involvement is and how open they are to those things. Sometimes they are really busy and they'll be like, I haven't been to this in a long time, but I know this event is really cool and a lot of people join, and it gives you some insight as to like what the culture there is. But also you get to understand like what the like broader company can value in that. And that's at least one way that I've done that as I switched roles around the same company, and just into different teams to try to find that community.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times people, candidates have asked me what ERG or what do I do at HubSpot for community. And I have to sheepishly tell them that I'm a part of Asians at HubSpot, but I haven't attended one of our community chats in a while just because we've been so busy. But yeah, super important to really dive into that with recruiters and other company representatives and learn a little bit more about like the culture as well. I would love to turn that over to Kami now, maybe to answer that one as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, I mean, coming into HubSpot was like day and night when it came to like ERG groups that became available. In my past roles and in my past companies, I haven't had, a Latinos at HubSpot or Floridians from HubSpot. Miami's from HubSpot, which is its own culture within itself. So the fact that those communities already existed and I didn't have to be like necessarily a pioneer in cultivating this was something that was very valuable. But from my personal experience, a lot of my friends are also first gens in tech, first generations that went to college. So I think within our own group, we've cultivated like a nice resource type of friendship or relationship where we help each other whether it be through interviews, whether it be better prepping your resume, whether it be like role playing, things of that nature. So I think in my own small community of first gens, I've been, we've all been resources for each other.
Awesome. Loving that as well. And Nadine, turning it to you now.
I think just going based off what Kami said, like there's room for us all at the top. Like we don't have to be the only ones at the top and we don't have to like fight each other to get there. So I just think it's so important to continue to lift each other up, like with your mentees, like talking to them about what's available. If you found something that works for you, sharing that with people that look like us and that don't have the resources, because like we're not talking enough, we're not sharing enough with each other. So I think that that's super important. Like Kami knows, anytime I find something that works in sales, like I am sending it right over to her because I want to make sure that we're winning together. So I think that that's key. But just some of the other spaces, like I came from Salesforce before HubSpot. Not to say the bad name, especially us in sales, but I did come from Salesforce where I was president of Latino Force. Like it's just so important for me to continue to give back to my community, especially just understanding that I felt so alone going through this process of being a first gen in tech and like trying to navigate my way around, and anything that I can do to give back. I'm now part of the Women at HubSpot group, like just being able to give back to anyone that looks like me or even just anyone in general. Like I try to do what I can for the community. So I think just like any space, like we all have something to give. And a lot of the time, like Ami was saying, that imposter syndrome kicks in, but then you hear from people and like they're talking to you about how much of an impact you've had. And like, it's just so important to continue to give to others and to remember that there is room for us all at the top.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely what Tatiana said too. Like room for us all at the top. To be honest, like as long as we align in on those goals, we can really help each other, even like cross-functionally, right? Like partnering up together to make sure that we get there together is such a wonderful way to uplift each other. And it's a really positive climb, right? All right. So would love to kind of turn it over to maybe our ghost chat moderator, Hema. Is there anything that we can highlight from the group that's been watching? Any Q&As? Oh, awesome. How do you practice self-care in tech, especially as first-gen women of color? That's a fantastic question. Anyone right off the bat want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go. I have tons of self-care practices that I incorporate in my day-to-day. First and foremost is not feeling like you have to be on 9 to 5. Like that is, we're not meant as humans, as women of color, as humans, we're not meant to necessarily be on 24/7. So it's understanding that when you've had a very busy morning, let's say 9 to 12, giving yourself those 30 minutes of walking outside, being in the sun, having lunch away from your computer, kind of disconnecting for a little bit and not feeling like you have to constantly be on to prove yourself or to prove that you deserve a seat at the table or that you deserve a promotion. It's okay to be able to know when to unplug and to do things for yourself. So me particularly, I go sit in the sun in my backyard.
I love that, like the vitamin D, right? So, and with the flex, remote lifestyle, we can pick up our laptop and go work outside by the pool, by our backyard, and enjoy that outside fresh air instead of being in a stuffy office. I do apologize if you want to go in the office. That's on you. I don't understand you, but it's everyone's preference, right? All right, Brenda, any advice on self-care?
Yeah, I'm glad this question was asked. It's super relevant to what I'm working on day to day. But one of the other sessions too, I just want to call out real quick with Megan Thomas. She gave some really great advice on this stuff. So definitely check that out too. But for me, what I personally do, I'm a big advocate for therapy. I've been seeing a therapist for the last 7 years, I think. It hasn't been always the same one. And, it definitely is a hurdle to find one that works really well with you and that you vibe and get actually what you want out of it. But I'm a super, super big advocate for therapy. I think everyone could use it, even the best people. But a day-to-day thing that I've been doing a lot more of, I want to say in the last year and a half, is I have a folder on my computer, and full transparency, my work computer I also use as my personal computer. But I have a folder here that I just put in all the wins that I have. Any nice email that I get, nice Slack message, anything that I'm really proud of, even just the headline of the document, I'll just take a screenshot and stick it in that folder. And that folder comes in really handy on a day where I work in data a lot. So if I push the wrong button and have made a ton of work for myself, I'm oh shoot, this is kind of a bad day. I just look at that folder. Now it's a collection of a bunch of different pictures. I even have a screenshot of my cat joining a Zoom. And it just makes me laugh. So just that little folder of positivity that I call it is really kind of helpful for me on my bad days. And actually a manager of mine recommended it a year and a half ago, and I still do it to this day. So it was good advice.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And you're gonna have to send us that photo later because I want to see it. But I love the focus on therapy as well, because I think it's definitely a privilege too. For me, I didn't get to kind of experience and actually go to a trained professional until I joined tech and I got health benefits, right? So it's a kind of unfortunate, but also definitely recognize the privilege that being in this tech space has afforded me too, to be able to go to therapy. It's super important and impactful. And family, definitely, Nadine, want to turn it over to you as well.
Sweet. I love this question so much because self-care is so important to me. I think I'll answer this way, and just I practice mindfulness so much, and it's more of a lifestyle for me. Every morning I have my routine that I go through. So it's meditating every single morning. It's having a little bit of like knowledge drop. So reading 10 pages or so, or just a few pages, meditating midday for just 5 minutes. And meditation doesn't necessarily have to be this formal meditation practice, but just sitting with myself and just breathing, honestly, and just being super present, because like in sales, the job is super difficult. And just in general, just in tech, like we deal with a lot, not to scare anybody away, but it really is like we have a lot that we have to focus on. And if we can't get our minds right and we can't just like stabilize our brain for a second, it does get really difficult. So for me, meditation and just mindfulness is so, so important. I also make sure that I eat as healthy as possible. I think that just like that's key, because think about like when you're eating, like I love pizza so much, but if you're eating pizza or just like, you know, trashy food throughout the day, like you're going to feel down and like you want to be your best self. Especially when you're handling things like rejection every day. So just making sure that you're eating clean and that your mind is just clean. And I know it's hard sometimes, so just being able to be consistent with it is what I like to do. So.
Oh gosh, yeah, definitely agree with that mindfulness as well. And what is it? I'm not hip enough, but is it what be demure, be mindful? Is that what's the trend these days, right? I don't know. I'm showing my age. Sorry, guys. Yeah, thanks. You know what? Speaking of pizza, though, I do have a very, very controversial question I want to throw into the chat for our attendees. How are we feeling about pineapple on pizza? Like, is that still a topic? Is that still a thing we all argue about anymore? I don't know. You know, drop those comments there. All right, Hima, what is our next question on deck to highlight? Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. How do you deal with burnout in tech? I think that's definitely relevant. Yeah, across all companies, right? All right. Who is up? Let's see. Let's put Brenda in the hot seat for now.
Thanks. I'm having a tough time remembering the exact resource, but there, honestly, again, I trying to be transparent here. I definitely dealt with burnout, especially like during the middle of the pandemic time when it just felt like you had to get work done still while also dealing with all the outside stuff of like, there's a global pandemic, we can't leave our house. There's a couple of times that I honestly just Googled how to deal with burnout. I also, to go off of what Nadine said, I started doing some meditation during that time. That really helped me like center myself and really understand that it was the burnout that was putting me in this negative space and not me. And then from there, I started having conversations with my manager about it. This is the resource that I'm not remembering exactly where it was, but I'm sure I found it off of Google because I didn't know this before. And it was like how to have that conversation with my manager in a way that you are not going in saying, I have too much work and I can't keep up, because that's probably not even it. It's probably either the fact that you are getting too much work because there's not enough resources and you're not hiring, or you like just really need to learn how to, delegate and, you know, spread the work out evenly. And there's some great resources out there. Just take a Google and have that conversation with your manager. I think at the end of the day, your manager is going to be your closest advocate in the workspace, and being able to have those open conversations and telling them where you are in a way that's productive for you is going to be really, really helpful to get you out of the burnout stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I love as well, kind of your approach from that beginning point, right? It's almost like tying back to the very beginning of, I think, Kami said it, you know, empathy. So we have to be empathetic to ourselves as well. Like, you know, addressing where did this burnout come from? It's not, you know, because I can't do it. I'm here, right? And so being empathetic, not just to others, but giving that to ourselves as well, that grace. Yeah, I love that. All right, Nadine, you're up.
Yeah, I think this question is really relevant, especially to Kami and I just being in the sales world. And honestly, like burnout is real, especially in sales. I'm sure in every other position, but it is really difficult when you don't have your minds right. And that burnout can be like really negatively affecting you because what happens is your mind goes into this like scarcity mindset because you're like, all right, I need to like get this, I need to get to this number. And you're like chasing and chasing. What I've done, and I don't know if this is the best advice, but it has worked for me, where I've detached from this number or this specific like outcome that I need to get. So detaching from that outcome has allowed me to just be present in my meetings. So just listening and being engaged without feeling like, all right, I need to hit this specific number and that's all that my mind is thinking about. So that's helped me a lot. I also think just like taking a break, taking a second, making sure that there's not like meetings back to back to back on your schedule, because that will lead to burnout. So maybe just having like a block of 15 minutes or like 5 minutes just to like recenter yourself is so important before you go into the next call. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's like I will take that into the next call if I don't just recenter myself. So that's been really important for me. And then the other piece is just like having something outside of work. Like, what are you doing? I practice yoga every single day. My mindfulness, like these are things that I care so much about. So my life isn't just 100% HubSpot. It is, I'm a yogi. I do this. I go on walks. Like, what else are you doing? And don't let just your work define you, is the way that I would deal with that.
I love that as well. And loving as well that relevance of like, don't have so many meetings back to back. You're kind of unfortunately putting yourself into a corner and getting burnt out. And I love that as well at HubSpot. One of the things that we implement is like no internal meetings on Monday or Friday. On Friday, I slipped and said Monday. That was hopefulness, but it's Friday when we have that time to kind of decompress and catch up over the week, and get that centered time in to focus on work. That's fantastic advice. And Kami, turning it to you now for that last piece of advice as well.
Yeah, Nadine kind of stole the words out of my mouth. I think it's filling your cup outside of work. Like what else defines you besides account executive at HubSpot? Do I play pickleball? Do I play yoga? Like, do I really value learning new recipes? I think so much of being burnt out is just putting 100% of or all your eggs on work or in work, and not finding that balance of like, okay, who am I outside of work and how can I fill up my cup on that end, so that when my work day is over at 9 a.m. the following day, I feel refreshed because I've done something that I actually value, love, and enjoy.
Absolutely. Yep. That's definitely a great way to just kind of bring it back right to the center and core of who you are. And if you're a pickleballer, you know what? Let's talk about it later. I need you to explain to me what the fuss is about pickleball. So, all right. Okay. I think we have some more great questions. What's next for us to be highlighted? All right. Wow. That is fantastic. So for technical professions, how would you recommend to build your personal brand to attract attention from companies, especially if you're from a non-target school, in a way that exudes authenticity and your technical skills, but in a way that doesn't come off as being gloaty, for lack of it? I think that was a great word. Yeah, that doesn't come off as being gloaty. Yeah. Nadine, you want to start off that one for us? Yeah.
Yes, I will try to tackle this one. This is a long question, so hopefully I can tackle each piece of it. But this is something that I definitely struggle with. I think it's very difficult for me, like as a Latina that comes from a place that like I didn't really have much, like especially my family has never had any of this. So for me to talk about some successes or like try to build my brand, it's so difficult because I don't want to come across like I am better than you guys or like I have more than you. So it's this internal battle that I constantly deal with, where I want to build my brand. Like I want to talk about my success, but I have this hesitancy because I don't know how it's going to be received, or I don't know how to approach it in a way that could be helpful. But I'm realizing now it's like, if we're not talking about it, then how could we help anyone? And how could people know that they could aspire to do those things? So I don't really think it matters where you went to school. Like, I think it's more so just about understanding who you are and what you bring to the table. So back to that initial piece that I was talking about of understanding your value, like if you can just take a second to understand what you could bring to the table, what skills you have, it doesn't matter what school you went to. It doesn't matter where you grew up. Like none of that really matters. So hopefully that answers the question.
Absolutely. Yeah. And definitely, I wish, more companies kind of approach it in a way that I feel like HubSpot tries to as well. And definitely we're not perfect. We just try our best, right? And I think like Megan, one of our speakers from before, I love shouting her out because she didn't go to college and she didn't, do that traditional route of, going into getting a degree. But you know what? She still became an instructor at, UC Berkeley. She's still someone that's fantastic and an advocate for first gens in tech. Like she still comes with all of those skills, and it's really incredibly authentic as well. But yeah, let me turn it over now to maybe Connie to answer that question as well.
Yeah, of course. I think that, LinkedIn is a very powerful platform where you can kind of start to build your personal brand and attract attention, despite not necessarily coming from Harvard or Yale or, those very prestigious universities, and really honing in on something that you're passionate about. So whether it be something quite specific in the technical space or something at least in your personal life, like for me it's women's health and women's wellness, and just creating a brand based off of authentic, I don't know, industry related articles that you reshare on your page, or commenting and networking with folks that are trailblazers in that space. I think that there's many ways that you can go about doing it despite not coming from a more traditional university or top university or school, that can help you stand out in a crowd of many.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up LinkedIn as well, because definitely as a recruiter, that's something I use every day. And I don't search for schools. I search for specific skills right in your profile. So if you're putting those skills out in your profile that I did this at this experience, it's going to return you in those searches that I'm looking for. Say a product designer with skills in design systems, right? So definitely not looking at the school you graduated from. It's not as much of a relevancy to like the expertise that I'm looking for, right?
Totally.
And Brenda, for you now.
Yeah, I love this question around branding, because when you're thinking of like your individual brand, I think it's also totally fine to see like what these bigger brands and like bigger celebrity brands are doing, and you can definitely take something from them too. And where I'm going with that is, when you think of like somebody who has a really good personal brand and you see them as really authentic, one of the things that you can always really see clearly is their why, and they're really good about explaining their why. So when you're sitting there and your why is you want to have a career in the tech industry, that's your opening stance. Like, why do you have this curiosity? Why do you have this passion? What sparked that energy? Lead with that, and I think that really comes out as really authentic and not braggy or gloaty at all. Because then you can talk about the things that you have done to let you like progress and let you get to where you're going. And then one thing I remember I did this a while ago, and I don't think the website exists anymore, but it was also recommended by one of my mentors at the time. We did, like, I was encouraged to do coffee chats. So I know LinkedIn networking is like super big right now. I think it has been for the last few years. But there was this one point in time where I was just like talking to different professionals and being like, hey, like, how did you get into your field? Like, how do you become the lead designer of UX at your company? And it was like 15-minute chats. But what I did was like I took notes, and then I had a little website where I was just like I asked them for consent, obviously, but I've had this little website where I just put my little like interview notes. And then I used it for one of my own interviews later on as just like, hey, this is just something that I've done. And it kind of turned into my personal brand. So start with your why and then figure out some creative way or relevant way to share that. And I think LinkedIn is just an awesome way that you can post about that too. And it's super resourceful.
Yeah, definitely. I love that suggestion, Brenda. Like, you basically were suggesting competitive analysis, right? Like, let's do a little bit of UX research here and see what are other people with those positive brands doing that really for us sparks that authentic kind of connection, right? And I saw as well in our chat, Jennifer, that's a great suggestion. Like, not just shouting out those positives and wins, but balancing as well with the authentic sharing of like the challenges that we have to overcome, because a lot of times a lot of people are feeling the same way, but maybe they don't see that connection because social media kind of prompts us to only really share wins all the time, right? Yeah, love it. And you know what, actually, with competitive analysis in mind, we're not competing, we can all be at the top, but maybe in the chat let's put some whys in there. Like, what's your motivation? What is your why, in your personal brand as well? Would love to see folks involved in this chat and in this session kind of share it out and kind of give other people as well that kind of spark of inspiration too. All right, so what is the next question on the docket? Oh gosh, yes. What's something you wish someone had told you about entering the tech industry? All right, so let's maybe pass it over to Connie for what's something you wish someone had told you.
Yeah, that's a good one. I really like that question. I think that and this is a positive thing. I wish that someone would have told me from the very beginning, prior to me having to like find out on my own, was the earning potentials that are possible within the tech industry. So, a lot of the times we go into like the more traditional roles, or we try to find traditional roles because it's what we know, it's what we've heard, it's what we've seen. But about 1 or 2 years in, where I started like really having good income, I realized, well, there's a lot of earning potentials here. And it's something that maybe doesn't get spoken about so much in college. In college, I was never told about, hey, sell software, get into the tech space. And so that's something that I wish I would have known, because I maybe would have shifted the way what I studied in college. I maybe would have connected with more mentors that are already in that space to kind of get ahead of the questions that would be asked in interviews, for example. So I wish that I would have known that before coming into the industry, because it would have been good to get ahead of that in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely as well. Yeah, definitely want to tag in now, Brenda. Yeah, let's tag Brenda in.
Yeah, thank you. I immediately thought of, but back when I was first going to apply to HubSpot, I wish somebody told me back then that you don't need to meet every single qualification on the qualification sheet or requirements that you see online, and that if you hit, I don't know what a standard number is. I think for me, I was like maybe like 7 out of 10 things, and I was so like, oh my god, they're gonna ask me about like experience in this platform that I've never touched. And it took me a while, and I think things happen for a reason. But once I did it, I felt so happy and glad. And now it's been 6 years that I've been here, and I don't look back at all. But yeah, I wish somebody told me to just send it, just do it. You don't have to be 100% qualified or overqualified to apply to something.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I love most about the recruitment process at HubSpot is we try to include that in our job descriptions. I think studies show that a lot more women will read a job post and like feel like they don't hit every single thing and they don't apply anymore. And so we add that little blurb to say, if you don't hit 100%, still do apply. And as a recruiter, I'm telling you, still do reply, because what will happen is sometimes I have a job that might not be posted and I see your application come through and I'm like, actually, this person would be great for this thing down the line. And since I know you're interested in HubSpot, I kind of save that away and hopefully we'll be able to reach out to you. Now, don't get wild with that advice, okay? Apply to things that are still semi-relevant, right? So even if the leveling is a little bit off, I might be able to reach out to you for maybe a mid-level role later or an entry-level role later. But don't, go and apply for like a sales role if you have like only experience in engineering, right? Because then that recruiter working in sales is like, I don't know anything about engineer recruiting, right? So stay in that ballpark, but we can definitely help if you do apply. All right, so Nadine, want to give you the space as well to kind of share.
Yeah, so what comes to mind here is like the imposter syndrome that came up when I was looking to apply to tech, because I didn't speak this corporate language, or like I didn't know how to speak like these other people. And like that comes from like growing up in the Bronx and like just like having this New York lingo that I had. And I didn't feel like I sounded like anybody in the tech world, honestly. So it made me feel like I couldn't apply, or I just like wouldn't get the job. What I learned and what I wish that someone would have told me is like, it doesn't matter what you sound like. It is the skills that you have. And a lot of those skills are transferable. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the grind that you have. It's the abilities that you have. So what I learned to do, which I wish someone would have told me, is to have a personal story, which will ease your stress when you're going into interviewing, and then have your professional story. So it'll just like authentically be like a great answer for you, and it'll calm your nerves a bit. So I think really key is like, it doesn't matter what you sound like. It doesn't matter where you come from. Like you can still apply, and you don't have to sound like this certain like technical person. So hopefully that's helpful. And the other last piece that I'll mention here is like, you do not have to be technical. Like I still don't believe that I am super technical. Like I've learned a lot here in my role at HubSpot, but I am definitely not a technical person. So hopefully it's helpful.
Oh. Absolutely echo that. Sometimes I mean, even joining this, thank God we had Angie, who has been our helpful behind the scenes person. Even Brenda has also been our behind the scenes person, getting everything set up, because I just joined. And so, thank y'all so much for being there to help get this entire virtual event going. And there's so much on the back end that requires a lot of knowledge. And I work in tech as a recruiter. Doesn't mean I know how to do the things that I recruit for, right? All right, so let's do a few more questions. I think we have about 15 minutes. So, oh yeah, that's a great one. So yeah, harkening back to that kind of the main motivation and the whys and the authenticity. Can our panelists share their whys? So anyone ready right off the bat, maybe can jump right in.
Yeah, I can go. My whys are definitely my parents and my siblings. I mean, both my parents, did not have all the opportunities that I've had. And thanks to them, I've been able to really go to an amazing university and have opportunities as such, due to the fact that they've hyped me up my whole life. They've told me I'm capable. They've told me I'm worthy. They've told me that even though there's 100 people in a room and maybe only 1 or 2 might look like me or sound like me, I'm just as important, and I always deserve a seat at the table. And so a lot of my whys is for them, to give them, in their later years, the life that they deserve, and make them really proud of all of the hard work that they've put into me. And hopefully me giving it back to my future kids or future communities that need it.
Oh, I hope you share this recording with them so that they can see, and hopefully, bring some tears to their eyes as well, their impact on you, right? All right, Brenda, you're up.
I feel like Cami really took the words out of my mouth. I was going to word it a little more maybe selfishly, but I was going to say my whys have always been my family and pay potential, to be honest. And they go hand in hand for me, just similar to Cami's story. I grew up in a family of mostly single women who raised me, and we're mostly on, survival mode for most of my life. My mom is in her mid to late 40s and just got her first corporate job. So shout out, Mom. And she's going back to school. And a lot of my why has always been, I definitely want to get to a point where, dream world, if I had a magic wand and could make this happen, I want to make sure that my family is always financially stable and never has to be in survival mode. And having been in survival mode myself, throughout my younger years too, it's just really important to me to not feel that way and to kind of build that comfort outside of work. And how Nadine was mentioning earlier, making sure that I have a life outside of work and that I'm not just focusing on that. That's really what drives me to do what I do.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And yeah, hearing the fact that your mom's going back to school as well, it really broke my heart. So many questions earlier from today and the other sessions about people how old is it to be too old to break into tech? Never. It's never too late, never too old. You can at any point make a pivot, make a change. It's totally doable. It's definitely maybe a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but it doesn't mean it's not doable at any means. All right, so Nadine, turning it over to you.
Yeah, I love this question so much. I think for me, I'm the oldest of 9 now. So there are a lot of little people that are trailing behind me, and my why has always been to set an example for them and pave the way for them. We grew up in very difficult situations, and honestly, the path ahead was never clear. So my why was always, how can I be sure that they never have to go through this, that no generation past me has to go through this. And so really, it's always been my brothers and sisters. To this day, I think about times where Salesforce was my first tech job. And sorry to keep talking about Salesforce, but Salesforce was my first tech job. And I just remember studying so hard. And I remember my younger brother and sister just sitting there and watching me study and watching me just fight so hard to interview. And it was a long interview process, and they were living with me at the time, and just watching them be so excited for me. And I was just this is why, this is the reason why. And when I got the job, they were so happy for me and just so excited that I could do this. And they knew they could do this as well. 2 of my other younger siblings are now in tech. And it's just so incredible to see that I could do something like this, and what I'm doing actually is making an impact. So that's definitely my why.
Trailblazer indeed. And it definitely an example of why I think representation is so important. Being able to see somebody, doing that, and then you're kind of oh, I'm really yeah, it's very similar to this person. And if, they can do it, like, can I? And loving the entirety of this, like, I think event is showing, like, yeah, representation is super, super duper important to see other people that are in tech on screen and realize, yeah, if I'm first gen, I can definitely still break into the tech industry, right? So definitely loving that motivation and that inspiration. All right, so I think we are about 10 more minutes. So let's do maybe like 1 or 2 more questions. Let's see how time plays out. All right, what is the next one? Okay, so how do you feel the tech industry is doing in terms of diversity and inclusion for first generation professionals? Maybe Brenda, you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. I would say, transparently, I don't think that we've ever hit 100%, diversity goals or really being super inclusive in every industry. However, I do feel we're in a period of time where companies are paying more attention to that. Companies do realize that in order to be able to make a profit, they got to have people on the inside doing that. And in order to do that, you have to have your employees be some level of happy. Some companies do that better than others. Shout out HubSpot. I think we do a great job. But I'm biased there for sure. But yeah, I think we've got a long way to go. So I would definitely keep that in mind as you're interviewing for new roles or looking at any potential roles in the future, to really understand that you're interviewing them too, to make sure that they're going to provide a space that you're going to be comfortable in. So I don't have any specific stats, but that's my take. I think we can always be doing better as a corporation, as a company, and as a potential hire, potential employee. You have also the ability to interview them and make sure that you understand where they're at in that journey.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, turning that script around, right? Y'all are also empowered to interview back to that company, right? Because you are bringing value. So making sure that you're, going to that right place that's going to set you up for success and in an environment that's supportive, super duper duper important. Also, I'm looking into the chat. I'm thinking, Kim, you might need to go thank your brother too when you're done with this event, right? All right, Nadine, I'm turning it to you now.
Yeah, I think that what Brenda said is so important. And this is something that I think, like, as minorities and honestly as first gens in tech, like, we don't think about enough, which is like to stand up and like talk about what we actually care about, which is, will we feel safe in that workplace? Will we feel seen? Will we be supported? And like ask questions like this. Like, typically, like, I remember when I was initially interviewing, like, I was so nervous and like I didn't know what questions to ask. And like I thought I had to ask like these professional questions, but like, this is also your career and your future. How are they going to support you? And I think it's really important because as first gens in tech, and honestly, like as a Latina, we don't have many people that look like us. And so what happens is we feel really alone, and sometimes that can lead to failure. Whereas there's some other folks that just have a lot of people that look like them and have support, or have parents that have been in this industry and they are more successful because they kind of know their way around or know someone. And a lot of times we can feel alone. So it's really important just to understand what the resources look like for you on the other side. I will say, and not to just like keep like pushing HubSpot, but HubSpot had one of the realest like diversity and inclusion like seminars in the beginning. So it was just like so amazing to see the work that HubSpot is doing. Like Brenda said, no company is doing everything that they can do, but I think we are in taking a step in the right direction. And it's up to people like us who are in the space to continue to push through and just use our voices and like talk about what we need, especially as we're in the role. If we're not seeing people like us on our teams, we should be speaking about it and bringing people like us onto our teams because we are qualified. So there's no reason why there aren't enough people that look like us. So.
Yeah, love that. Absolutely. We are definitely qualified, and I want everyone to leave feeling super duper empowered because definitely if you see it, you can action on it and be that representative that maybe you were looking for, but you might be it for somebody else, right? All right. So Kami, turning it to you now. One last thing.
It might be hard to follow after those two responses. But I would say that, even when I was going through the interview process, I think that when I spoke with the recruiters over at HubSpot and even a couple of managers, a lot of the questions that I had were actually around, inclusivity and how many women were part of leadership, and not only women, but how many women of color, how many women who were also Latinas were part of that. And I think asking for specifics, depending on where you're interviewing, right, or no matter where you're interviewing, is really valuable to really understand, like, is there a fair representation of folks like me? So I feel like the tech industry is moving in the right direction. I think it's always worth bringing those questions to light, and really getting them to like answer it truthfully, not just like, yeah, we're diverse, but it's like, how diverse, right? Like, what does your leadership look like? How many women are on the team, things of that nature. And, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think that the tech industry is moving in the right direction, but there's sky's the limit. There's a lot that we could be doing better on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, definitely when, I remember like applying to HubSpot, and I think that was when Yamini was first introduced as the up and coming CEO. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this company is going to be led by an Asian American woman.
Yeah.
That's so fantastic. Like not just like on a C-suite or in a leader, but like the leader as the CEO.
Leader.
Yep. And that's
the point for me, for sure.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so I know we only have about 4 more minutes. I think maybe we can do one last short question. So maybe do we have a short one that we can try to kind of... Oh, that's perfect. What is a book or podcast that has influenced you? Anyone right off the bat can think of something that they want to share.
I can go first. Perfect. So there's the podcast that I listened to when I was trying to break into tech, and I knew I wanted to go into sales. And I think Dr. V said it in her session where she mentioned like sales is really one of the easiest ways to break into tech. There's a lot of turnover, but like there is a good entry way, as she mentioned. So for me, it was this podcast called Sales Success Stories by Scott Ingram. I highly recommend it. I listened to this. I try to repeat what they were saying because this is the top 1% salespeople in the tech industry. And they would just talk about like, what does their morning routine look like? What do they do to be successful? And like talking about like tips and tricks. So for me, like I would literally just try to like talk about what they did or like emulate their morning routines, like just understanding what these 1% individuals did. And going into interviews, I just felt so much more confident because I heard what they did. I understood how they were successful. And I was like, I could do that too. And then just being able to like talk to myself in the mirror, like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to interview. And like, these are the words that I could use. So that's the podcast that I listened to. It's called Sales Success Stories by Scott Ingram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, Brenda, maybe any books or podcasts that help inspire you?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take this one step further because I'm just started getting into podcasts, and they're mostly true crime, so I don't have a ton there. But one thing that I've done in my marketing career is I've signed up for a few marketing newsletters, and one that I've been reading daily for like 4 years, I think, is the Morning Brew. They've now expanded. They've got several other like pillars. But that's a really great resource for like headline news, and they have a marketing section too, which I really enjoy just to like be on top of like the trends. And then, sorry, this is a plug, but we also have Marketing Against the Grain, which is actually a podcast that we put on now, and it's put on by HubSpot. But I actually really like it because I get to hear what our leaders are really interested in and the trends that they're looking at. And that's been really helpful at having like more broader conversations. And it's actually helped me expand on my work too. So those are the two I recommend.
Awesome. All right, Connie, last minute. What is that podcast or book?
For sales, I would say 30 Minutes to P Club. 30-minute snippets, an incredible podcast, really like provides real life scenarios so you can improve your sales skills. And then from like a wellness and health one, because I think that those two go hand in hand, is The Genius Life by Max Lugavere. Both great. And that's really to improve your mental state, your health state, so that you can be successful in your career and in whatever you choose to move forward with in life.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I know that we have a ending event as well on the main stage. So on the left-hand side of the window here, there should be a stage button that you can push. Looks like a camera labeled stage. It's above the session 1 that's highlighted orange right now. Thank you all for joining us and for your very wonderful questions. It's been a joy and a privilege to chat with you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.